People who have woken up during surgery, what happened? Story 1. I was having a triple bypass. They were taking the graft artery out of my arm. I woke up and heard the sounds of an operating room. People talking, metal clanging against metal. Heard someone close up that arm now. I was thinking it was over. I had made it. But I still couldn't open my eyes, and my mouth felt like it was full of tubes. Arms were strapped down. Then I heard the man's voice again, and he said, "Okay, I'm going into the chest." Well, that got me a little excited. I had agreed to the open heart surgery, but I didn't want to be awake for it. I tried moving as hard as I could to let them know I wasn't asleep. I felt pressure on my chest, and it moved. As the pressure moved, I felt a coldness where the pressure was as he was cutting into me. I worked as hard as I could to get moving and found I was able to flex my butt and leg muscles just a little bit. I started doing that in rhythm and got the gurney rocking a little bit, head to toe. The pressure stopped, and I heard, "Oh, this man is not asleep." Someone else said, "Oh." In about 3 seconds, I was out again and didn't wake up until I was in recovery. After I was moved to ICU and the hoses were pulled out of my throat, the doctor asked everyone to leave the room, and he asked what I remembered. I told him about what I wrote above. He said that was him saying those things. He said the art of heart surgery is keeping you under anesthesia so you don't know what's going on, but not so deep that they can't get the heart started again. Doesn't give me any stress or dread like some people have told me they thought it would give them. I'm just glad I got his attention before he started spreading ribs. Story 2. I had an endoscopy and colonoscopy the same morning. I was told since I was doing both that I would have general anesthesia and not remember a thing. I warned them that I have had to be given extra medicine before. I'll tell that story next. But I think they didn't believe me. I didn't wake during the endoscopy. During the colonoscopy I came to, but I was heavily out of it from the drugs I needed for the endoscopy. I was looking at the screen and I realized I saw what was the inside of my colon. Anesthesia made me really dizzy and weird, so I decided to make a joke. I said, "Looks like I did a really good job cleaning myself out," referring to the prep you do the day before to clean out your bowels. Following this, I started laughing. Thinking back, this could have been bad because you're supposed to stay still so they don't puncture anything. They got a good laugh out of me, though, and turned up the meds. I don't remember the rest. The second story is I have had to have a lump the size of a golf ball removed from my breast. Luckily, it was benign. Before surgery, they gave me the anesthesia, and it seemed normal at first. Instead of falling asleep, though, I just went on a really crazy trip. The big light next to me was shimmering like it was wet and changing colors. The tiles on the ceiling were expanding and getting longer, then smaller. This went on for what seemed like a long time before the room looked normal again. I spoke up and said, "I think you need to give me more." The nurse must have had a near heart attack. I was supposed to be asleep. The doctor came in, verified I was wide awake, and they gave me more. Story 3. At the young age of 5, it became aware to myself and the entire medical staff that my body processed general anesthetics far quicker than it should, thus causing me to wake up in the middle of an endoscopy, tube down the throat to look at poop in my stomach and throat. It was not actual poop, just stuff, I guess. It was the first one I was having in regards to monitoring a growth in my throat. Hands down, the most traumatizing experience I've ever had to deal with. I tried to move and began coughing and gagging on the tube that was down my throat. At the age of 5, I put up a decent fight and was able to let out a scream, which, from my mother's account, she knew it was me immediately. Of course, panic sets in. The doctors begin yelling that I'm awake, and before I knew it, I was asleep again. In my head, this instance occurred over what I thought was a 5 to 6 seconds, that is. Turns out I woke up 7 minutes into the operation and was wheeled into the room and wheeled out in under an hour. I remember the immense amount of pain I was in to have this metal rod down my throat and trying to move, ultimately messing up a bunch of stuff. The scariest part was the white. Everything was so white. The outfits, the walls, and to this day I have horrific nightmares and still hate being in and around hospitals. That stuff sucked. From here it was a whole mess of legal issues and health problems, all while cancer cells were very evidently present in my throat. Crazy childhood, man. I'm good now, though. Too long didn't read, woke up during endoscopy, scary as stuff. Doctors were even scared. Story 4. I woke up during surgery to repair a shattered humerus. My whole shoulder was dissected open, and a dude was using a screwdriver and a drill to attach a steel plate to the bones to pull the parts together. Me. Ah! Screaming through 02 mask. Doc, turning pale. I thought you were out. Me. I'm not freaking out, you stupid mofo son of a witch. Ah! This freaking hurts. Stop that. God dang it. Continue to scream curses in 5 languages at the poor doc, who was looking at the anesthesiologist. And then I was out. My wife, who was in the waiting room, said she knew it was me screaming and really had to keep herself calm and not run back there and start kicking butts. I felt so bad at the nasty stuff I said to the poor doc that I looked him up and apologized a week or so later when I was in for a post-hospital stay checkup. Me. I'm really sorry for the stuff I said to you. Doc. You remember that? Me. Yeah, and I'm really not like that. I'm sorry. Doc, chuckling. It's okay, it happens. I'd yell too. So, how are you? Me. Better, thanks again, Doc. Without you, I'd have a stainless steel joint and be even more messed up than I am with just some screws and rivets and stuff. Or have a plain pinned-up sleeve and no arm at all, because that damage was epically bad. Story 5. This story might be a little long, but when I was 17, I got appendicitis, but the kicker is I was misdiagnosed twice. I went a full month with a ruptured appendix that gave me a softball-sized cyst. The bacteria that leaked from my ruptured appendix created this cyst. Anyway, I spent 4 weeks in bed, popping 2 hydrocodone 4 times a day. Went to the local hospital twice now, and they kept saying it was lymph nodes or some BS, and it would go away on its own. Eventually, my parents took me to a different hospital, and they diagnosed me with appendicitis and needed to do emergency surgery because apparently I could have passed away if I left that cyst there much longer. They ended up opening me up and draining the cyst that night. I remember them knocking me out for the procedure, and then I woke up to an extreme force like I had a 500-pound boulder on my lower right side where the appendix is. I remember seeing the doctors with some tubes, like forcing them into my abdomen, and it freaking hurt. They were trying to get the tubes into the cyst to drain it apparently, but holy heck, it was the most uncomfortable thing I can remember. Not only the pain, but I will never forget that horrible god-awful smell that came from the pus they were draining from the cyst. Story 6. I was having surgery on my ankle in 2005, getting a few pins placed because I'm super graceful and broke it. I woke up to hearing what sounded like a drill and feeling a lot of pressure at my foot. I didn't feel any pain, thank goodness. I opened my eyes and looked directly at the anesthesiologist, who immediately said, "Hold on, she's waking up." Everyone kind of stopped what they were doing, and then I went back under. When I came back, I was in the recovery ICU with a doctor. I asked her how long into the surgery I woke up, and she told me I was only out 15 minutes before I needed more anesthesia. She also told me I'd scared the crap out of her, because it was the first time anyone had ever woken up on the table, in her experience. Granted, she was fairly young, so I don't think it's all that uncommon. She was really cool about everything, though. She asked if I'd been afraid and needed someone to talk to, and I told her no. I was never scared or in pain, so as far as I was concerned, it was just a weird experience during my otherwise successful surgery. Story 7. I chose to be sedated and knocked out for an endoscope when I was 17. This was the first time I'd ever been put under, and it didn't go so well. I now know that I have the weird gene red-haired and pale people get that causes us to metabolize narcotics and sedation differently. Basically, it takes a poop load of drugs to knock me out. Up until then, I hadn't had any experience with it. The sedation they gave me put me out for about 10 minutes. I woke up suddenly and violently during the procedure. I started kicking and punching and trying to pull out the endoscope. The doctor and nurse tried to hold me down, but I kept fighting them. At the time, I just remember thinking, why are they so upset? I'm just laying here doing nothing. They had to give me a ton more sedative to put me out again. A couple months later, when I had my wisdom teeth out at the hospital, they did the whole breathe deeply and count back from 100. I got down to about 65 when they realized they needed to administer more. They said I took more than most grown men. Story 8. I woke up, felt really peaceful. Couldn't really see anything. I think my eyes were just cracked open a bit, so I had the impression of people moving around. Then I tried to take a breath. Couldn't do it. All my muscles were paralyzed. I started to get air hunger so badly, my mind was racing. I was in a panic. but I could not make my lungs take in air, and I couldn't tell any of these shadowy doctors and nurses around me that I was passing away. It was horrible. I think someone noticed my heart was racing because there was a sudden feeling of extra attention and alarm from the shadowy figures, and I was put under again. When I spoke with my doctor about it later, he admitted there had been a bit of a problem with the anesthesiology, but that I had never been in danger. He apologized, and I appreciated both that I hadn't imagined this horrible situation and that he hadn't tried to pretend I imagined it. My brother is a nurse, and some of the crappy things he's told me that he's seen happen in the operating room are never admitted to patients afterward. I guess because of fear of lawsuits. Story 9. I'm a big guy, and when the anesthesiologist gave me the dose, he told me I would be asleep in 10 minutes. About 15 minutes later, I'm lying there, still awake, and I can hear that they're about to start. So I decided to give a, "Hey there." The doctor was astonished and was like, "You're still awake?" So they gave me another dose, and I finally drifted off. I woke up somewhere in the middle of the surgery, and I could tell they had no idea I had woken up. I started to feel a lot of pain, but I was afraid of startling the doctor, making his hand slip, so I kind of quietly said, "Ow," but got louder and louder until they heard me and freaked out. All is well now, though. Heart is fully functional and all. Story 10. Broke my arm, very close to the wrist, during a dirt bike accident, but me being me, I was just like, nah, it's just a sprain, and it'll heal. It did heal, but very crooked. Went in for surgery to have it broken straight. Midway through surgery, I'm woken up by a tugging and a muffled thud. I open my eyes to see numerous doctors and nurses pulling my arm in opposite directions, and there's one doctor hitting my arm by the breaking point with a mallet. Next thing I knew, I'm waking up in the recovery room. Apparently, a nurse was on standby with a hardcore sedative, just in case, as I seemed to be initially resisting the gas. Story 11. Not to offend most of the replies, but almost all the procedures I've seen listed here look like they're done under sedation, monitored anesthesia care. Scopes, lower and upper ERCPs, dental extractions, etc. are most commonly done under this type of anesthesia. During the anesthetic consent, it should be explained that there is a possibility of hearing and seeing things on occasion, and if that occurs, more sedation will be applied. It's extremely rare for a recall to happen under a general anesthetic, not so much with sedation or twilight sedation as it's often called. On a side note, the eyes are shut taped during general anesthetics, so the probability of recall with sight is even more remote. Story 12. Woke up during a form of gastric bypass in 2001. I remember feeling the worst pain of my life. I couldn't hear anything and knew my eyes were taped shut. The only thing I could do was move my hands, as I could feel the restraint. I started rolling my hands as much as possible, and that was it. I had gallstones the size of golf balls in my gallbladder. Broke my leg during roller derby and walking on it to take myself to the hospital, and got to almost 8 centimeters dilated before I requested the epidural. Waking up during surgery is my 10. Nothing has come close to that pain. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of this video and have a wonderful day. Story 13. I vaguely remember becoming aware that I was in surgery during an operation to repair a detached retina. I didn't feel any pain since it was just the sedative and not the anesthetic that wore off. I remember seeing the doctor standing over me, singing the song from the Country Bear Jamboree at the Magic Kingdom in Disney World, and the doctor calling for more sedation before I knocked back out. Once I recovered, they told me I had to eat before allowing me to go home and asked what I wanted. I requested lasagna stuffed inside ravioli. Ravioli, ravioli, give me the formuoli. Man, those were some good drugs, whatever it was they gave me. Story 14. I woke up partway through rhinoplasty surgery that I was having done to fix what happened to my nose when I was little. I remember opening my eyes, but everything was a blur. He was using what I think there's a chisel and a hammer because I felt him tapping on something that was in contact with the bone between my eyes, and it was sliding down a tiny bit at each tap. He tapped one of the instruments on the bone and said something like, "Go back to sleep or I'll stop right now." I knew he was kidding, but I immediately fell asleep. Story 15. I woke up partway through having all 4 wisdom teeth removed. The assistant had wrapped her arms around my forehead, the dentist had his knee on my sternum and was yanking two-handed on the largest pair of pliers I have ever seen that somehow fit into my mouth. He stopped, nodded to the anesthesiologist, and then thankfully I didn't remember anything else. Edit. Doc in question was an oral maxillofacial surgeon, Sometimes your dentist can do this under only a local and you're just fine. Whatever, I didn't feel anything, certainly no pain, so I guess things were done right. Story 16. I had 4 wisdom teeth removed, all impacted. Funny thing was, I counted all the way to 10, looked at the doctor, and was like, is this it? Doctor was shocked, nodded for another hit, and I managed to make it to 7. Woke up during the operation with a giant vice in my face to keep my mouth open. Hit him again. Woke up a second time as he was yanking on my jaw. What the frick? Hit him again. The gas wore off right as he was cleaning up. I vaguely remember chatter during the procedure, too. Story 17. Woke up after the surgery, and the doctor came in and apologized. I had specifically mentioned that I require more anesthesia than most people, the redhead thing that is finally being acknowledged in modern medicine, but they didn't believe me and gave me a normal dose. Woke up during dental extraction. I just opened my eyes for a second or two and saw his name tag over me and heard machines. Fell back asleep. Now, I think I remember him wiggling around in my mouth, but I didn't feel it. I could just tell by how he moved. Story 18. Not quite woken up, but never went to sleep during wisdom teeth removal. Yes, I was supposed to be fully knocked out. Guess that whole thing about redheads needing more anesthesia is true? I was fully conscious, but drugged enough not to care. They knew and could just give me directions to open my mouth more, explain what they were doing, etc. After the surgery, I absolutely refused to sleep the rest of the day and was a grouch monster. Under normal circumstances, I'm up for a nap anytime, any place. Anesthesia? Never. Story 19. I was getting a lumbar puncture to check how the cancer was going and woke up on the table. I was listening to the people in the room getting ready to stick in the needle, and I said, I'm awake. And they were just like, better give him some more. I was around 10, and after that, they started giving me adult doses of propofol to put me under. I also needed to be held in place since I apparently like to flop around. Story 20. Was about 22, make oral surgery to have all 4 wisdom teeth out. My mom was in the waiting room, there was another mother there as well. I woke up as they were crunching one of my teeth out and screamed. Then I passed back out. That's all I remember. My mother told me the other lady got very upset and said, "Oh no, my daughter." To which my mom replied, No, that's my son. I still remember it, but I only woke up for seconds. Story 21. When my father had his hip replaced, he woke up in the middle of his surgery. He said it sounded like someone was building a house because of all the sawing and hammering. Luckily, he was still numb, so he just looked over at the anesthesiologist and said, "I think I'd like to go back to sleep now." My father said the guy looked like he pooped himself when he realized my dad was awake and quickly put him back under. Story 22. By design, they woke me up during surgery to my hand. They didn't tell me beforehand that they were going to wake me up, so when I did wake up, I thought I was in recovery. The surgery was to release some scar tissue from a previous procedure, so they woke me up to see if I could move my fingers. I made a fist, something that was tied off broke, and blood began to shoot out. Poof, I went back to sleep. Story 23. They were talking about buying vintage lunchboxes on eBay. I wasn't properly awake or in pain, but I could feel or had awareness that their hands were inside me. The anesthesiologist noticed my eyes were open, and I woke up again properly when they were wheeling me into recovery. I started laughing at the vintage lunchbox discussion, but dang, feeling their hands inside you seems so weird. Do you ever think back to it and sort of cringe at the feeling? Story 24. In the 90s, I woke up during knee surgery, just fully snapped awake and sat up. All of these wide-eyed, masked faces just turned and stared at me. I looked down at my clamped open leg, looked at one of the masked faces that everyone seemed to be deferring to, and said, I don't think I want to be awake for this. They put me back under, and as I drifted off, I started to feel pain. Story 25. I woke up when they were removing a small bone from my foot that was broken. Remember feeling them poke around in my foot, so I decided to take a look. Remember seeing the incision, and just then, a nurse noticed me with my head up. She just lightly pushed my head back down, told me to close my eyes, and the next thing I knew, I was in the recovery room. Pretty weird. Story 26. I woke up in the middle of dental surgery where the surgeon was cutting into the roof of my mouth and tried to ask what they were doing. He seemed pretty surprised and immediately told me to go back to sleep, as there was a knife in my mouth while I was trying to talk, and that's basically all I remember from the surgery as I listened and was asleep about 1 second later. Story 27. I woke up during wisdom teeth removal. They noticed and increased the dosage. It didn't work, and I pretty much had to lay there delirious for half an hour while they pulled my teeth out. I remember being really mad at the dentist for putting me through so much pain, but after the operation was over, they were very apologetic, and I realized that it wasn't really their faults. Story 28. I woke up while they were putting a metal plate in my arm. They used a block which basically made my entire arm from shoulder to hand numb. When I woke up, I could remember hearing a drill and a slight pressure in the arm they were working on. I just said, "Oh, this is awesome," followed shortly by someone saying, "Oopsie daisy," quickly went back to sleep. Story 29. I woke up halfway through my circumcision. 26 medical complications made it necessary. Thankfully, I was paralyzed from the waist down still, but apparently I said, guys, I think the sleep stuff wore off. 2 beeps, and like 30 seconds later, I was unconscious again. Also, holy crap, there's a lot of blood in dong during circumcision, like scary stuff. Story 30. Actually, pause on story 30 for a second. I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on circumcision. Yay or nay? Let's have at it. Story 30 for real this time. I had major surgery near my chest. I woke up halfway through, looked up and saw my chest wide open. It looked gross. A nurse noticed, and next thing I know, I was in recovery. I had no pain, but seeing that is beyond messed up. Throwaway since my surgery was private, and I don't like talking about it on my account. Story 31. I moaned and opened my eyes and moaned some more. Then the anesthetist put an end to that. After my recovery, my anesthetist told me in awe, "You woke up during the procedure." I explained to him that I fell asleep in the first place, not because of the anesthesia, but because I wanted to sleep. Good times. Story 32. I recently had a labrum, bicep, and tricep repair surgery. The surgery was taking longer than expected, and I woke up somewhat during the process, and I don't remember much other than the nurse and surgeon telling me to relax, and then I was back out. Nothing amazing or extreme, just simply woke up. Story 33. Not waking up, but during my first C-section, I started feeling pain that felt like my clitoris was being pushed out from inside. I screamed. They put a needle in my chest and gave me gas and air. All was okay. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.